So, Landon, obviously, we're chatting here today because the Cowboys made their head coaching hire. People online seem to be pretty upset about it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what was your reaction when you found out?
Well, I think that the timing of it was the first thing that came into my mind, right? To kind of announce it on a Friday night at almost, I think, 9 p.m. Eastern time, if I'm not mistaken. To me, that's what I call a good old-fashioned Friday news dump, right? Like almost sounds like a situation like you're trying to bury a bad PR situation, right? And not a grand announcement about your next head coach, and certainly not in fashion with what I would assume we normally would do with Jerry Jones and making these kind of announcements. Obviously, they're still having a press conference on Monday, and there's going to be lots of hoopla still. But having the announcement happen on Friday evening, I think kind of spoke to exactly how I think the Cowboys thought this was going to play in Cowboys fandom, right? I think they had an understanding that this was not going to be a popular pick. I think they, to their credit, I think they understand exactly how low morale is in Cowboys fandom right now. And maybe they made the decision that they think is the best choice for the head coach, but they knew it wasn't going to play well. And if that's the case, I commend them. But more than likely, it feels more like that they knew that they were going to get put against the wall for maybe not having as thorough a coaching search as they probably should have.
Yeah. I mean that's so interesting because the Cowboys are obviously, one of the most high profile, whatever you want to say, high profile, I guess, kind of jobs and teams in the league. So for them to kind of make that announcement, like you said, on Friday night, in almost kind of a way like sweep it under the rug, do you think, and obviously, maybe we're kind of speculating, or maybe you have inside knowledge, do they not feel super confident about the hire, or do you have any sense of what they're feeling about that?
Well, I mean, I know that it seems like there was some internal struggles happening, trying to finally pull the trigger on the situation. It feels like just based on what, the rumors kind of swirling around that it was a Steven versus Jerry situation where Steven was really enamored with going with Shotty and after their interview was just really liked the idea of the continuity and the kind of safe football pick. I think they got a sign off from Dak Prescott. We haven't heard that officially, but that's what the kind of whispers in the wind are. And I think for Jerry, he was looking for someone kind of flashier that would get enliven the fan base a little bit more. I mean, I think he's the kind of driving force behind the Deion Sanders rumors, even though he never even got an official invite, and it didn't seem like that was ever really going anywhere. So I do feel like there was some kind of faction going on, and I think that was reflected in sort of the rumors that we were hearing, right? Like we definitely were hearing, oh, it's on its way, it's happening, and then other folks that you trust in other media that local beat writers that had sources that were telling them, no, this is not really a thing. He's being interviewed as an offensive coordinator only. So I do think that there was kind of certainly some consensus building that needed to be done inside that building to kind of get everyone on board. And I think even though we didn't see how that sausage got made, I think we kind of saw the results of it, right? Like of just all the kind of constant shifting rumors that swirling around about how far along this was, but ultimately the whole thing kind of started and ended in a period of, I mean, like just over 96 hours, maybe. Like it was crazy how quickly his name became a candidate, and then suddenly we're announcing him as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, interesting. And I mean, kind of looking around the league, a lot of other teams with head coaching vacancies were making those hires, kind of a lot quicker than the Cowboys were. Do you feel like the Cowboys kind of put themselves in a situation where, other candidates were kind of coming off the board? Honestly, I don't know how intent or, how focused they were on the candidates that were hired by other teams, but do you think that they maybe acted too late in this process?
I think, look, I think that there can be a lot of debate that can go on about how good of a candidate Brian Schottenheimer is. Obviously, that's raging online right now. I think a large portion of the anger that's going on is not necessarily based on who Schottenheimer is or his qualifications, although that is something that is clearly coming up. I think the biggest issue with this whole situation was the process. It was absolutely terrible process. We can argue about the validity of Brian Schottenheimer being a first-time head coach and being a play calling head coach for the Dallas Cowboys and that being his first shot. I mean, I think that that's a whole separate conversation to have, but I think it's hard to argue that this was absolutely terrible process. They only interviewed really four candidates, two of them really just to satisfy the Rooney Rule, it feels like. And then the other folks that they even talked to, if you even throw in Mike McCarthy as one of those people, were the last three people to call plays for the Dallas Cowboys. Or I mean, actually, Brian Schottenheimer didn't even call plays, but the last three offensive coordinators slash play callers of the Dallas Cowboys. So it wasn't like they were making any kind of outreach to anybody outside the building. And I understand the value of familiarity and understanding who you're hiring. But in a time when it feels like the Cowboys are kind of stuck in a rut and they can't seem to break through the ceiling, you would have hoped that they would have kind of broadened their search and cast a wider net and interviewed. The Jets I think interviewed 20 people. The Jaguars interviewed like upwards of almost 30 people. The Cowboys only had four interviews in, and that doesn't really seem like a serious, comprehensive search. That seems like a search that was predetermined before this whole thing started, that they were going to get somebody familiar, and then it was almost just checking off a list and who they could get and kind of the situation that they were looking to get into.
Yeah. And I guess with all that in mind, and like you said, they maybe didn't cast as wide of a net as they should have or could have or whatever. But aside from everything, what's your take on the hire? What's your feeling about the hire?
Well, yeah, I mean, I talked about this a lot, on our podcast, the Locked On Cowboys podcast with Mark Exposure, like, because this is something that we've kind of gone over is like, trying to get past all the anger of the process and just the kind of confusion. Because look, I think just on a surface level, promoting a guy who was, yes, he was the offensive coordinator, but he wasn't the play caller, and he hasn't been the play caller for the last 2 years, hasn't been a play caller in the NFL since he was with the Seattle Seahawks. And to promote him to not only head coach, but I mean, as he's made clear, unless something has changed, which I haven't seen anything that's changed, he's made it very clear that wherever he was going next, he was going to be the play caller. So you're promoting him as the head coach and the play caller, which I think that's a big step up. I actually really like Brian Schottenheimer as a head coach candidate. Obviously, the son of a really fantastic head coach, Marty Schottenheimer, Marty Ball. If you guys are old enough and like me to have gone back and watched some of his dad's games. But I mean, look, the knock on Marty too was that he had all these great teams, these 13-3, these 14-2 teams that couldn't win in the playoffs, that kept on losing like in heartbreaking fashion in the playoffs. So even that situation has kind of like a jinx on it. So I think that, the process and the kind of bad vibes about what's been going on with the Cowboys aside, I think we should be giving Brian Schottenheimer a chance here, because I do think he has some of those qualities that his dad had that made his dad a really great coach. But I think we've got a lot to learn about, what this administration is going to look like before we can speak with any kind of confidence about how good it's going to be. Who's the defensive coordinator? Is what Brian Schottenheimer definitely calling the plays? Who's the offensive line coach? Who's these are all key spots, especially when you have a first time head coach. You need strong leadership at your position spots to kind of help buoy the lack of leadership at the top.
Awesome. Yeah. And I appreciate that you mentioned that because, going from the offensive coordinator to the head coach is not like a crazy thing. It's not an unheard of thing, obviously, right? We know that, but like you're saying, kind of the specific situation and maybe his lack of experience, it has certainly drawn some question marks. So
I think he's actually good. He has qualities to his personality that make him a better head coach than an offensive coordinator. I don't love him as a play caller, and I'm not excited about that. But there are things about his personality, his leadership styles. If you listen to him in any of the interviews he would give every Tuesday for the Cowboys, he's very personable. He's very knowledgeable. He understands how to break down complicated subjects and explain them very easily. There are lots of things about him that make me think that he will be a good head coach. I just worry about the situation he's walking into, a very high profile situation. And now he's having to add play calling to that whole mix. It's a lot, especially for a guy who, like I said, first time head coach, tough situation.
yeah, man, It's so interesting. It's a head scratcher because it is the highest profile job and maybe the highest profile team. Man, it's crazy. But I guess that's kind of all I got for you. I really appreciate you hopping on. Unless there's anything else you want to add, a message for the fans who are freaking out about the hire, whatever it may be.
Look, I've learned a long time ago, and I'm a fan. Obviously, I do this every single day, and if I wasn't a fan, I wouldn't be so obsessed with it. I think fans are going to have their reaction, in the moment. I think that they're allowed to, and especially in this situation, they're very much allowed to. But I think I would caution folks from, taking out their anger at Jerry and Stephen Jones in maybe a bad process of this situation on Brian Schottenheimer and giving that guy an opportunity to kind of, to go out there and do what he can do. Because as bad as things may seem, the Cowboys still have Dak Prescott, they still have CeeDee Lamb, they still have Micah Parsons, and those three guys alone are enough to put you in striking distance of something special. So all you need is a couple things to fall right, and it's the NFL. They've got an oblong ball. It bounces weird. Anything can happen.
Awesome. Well, Landon, thanks again for hopping on with me this evening. I guess really appreciate you taking some time, and I guess we'll check in maybe closer to the season, see how Shotty's doing around that time.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Landon.